I think we're live, Squid. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us for a special edition of Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan podcast, live from the inaugural Virtual Sports Card Expo. I'm Mike Wilson. My co-host, of course, is three-time 50-goal scorer Ricky Vaive.
Oh, fantastic. Nice and relaxed. And
Well, how you killing time these days? I mean, playing a lot of golf. I see. Obviously, didn't have a great game today because I didn't hear about the score yet. Yesterday was 75. So what was today?
I'm doing great. Just relaxing here right now. I had a golf game this morning. So it's golf in the morning, relax in the afternoon, and get to bed early.
And what'd you shoot today? You missed that part. We haven't heard that yet.
Today was a little off. It was an 81 today.
Yeah, of course, because I didn't hear it. Yesterday was 75, so we heard all about that, And but this quarantine this quarantine is keeping us active, and I guess my shameless self-promotion will be that it's given me time to finish off on my book. And where I've come from is those who don't know, I followed the Maple Leafs for all 89 games last year, and I documented, and I've done a book as a result of that with ace journalist Lance Hornby from the Toronto Sun. And he helped an awful lot, believe me, in this and piecing it together. And the release date for the book is October the 6th, and Brendan Shanahan has written the foreword. So we're really looking forward to it. Now, Squid, I understand you're in the process of writing a book with Scotty Morrison.
Certainly am, and I believe we've got it pretty much finished right now. There's pictures that need to go into the book, but I think the release date is probably early November. And Scotty did a fantastic job, and everything came out really, really good. And the cover is outstanding.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, what are some of the things fans can expect to hear or read in this book when it does come out? Give them a little taste of what they can expect.
Well, a lot of it has to do with my hockey career, obviously, but at the same time, it covers my entire life and some of the battles that I've had on and off the ice. And that's going to be all documented from an early age right through until today.
Fantastic. So it should be a very interesting read, and we're looking forward to it. So we're going to have some fun with that moving up into those two launch dates. Now, today, everybody's very excited because we've got a couple of great guests joining us within the next couple of minutes. And one of them is obviously one of the brightest stars in National Hockey League, Auston, Toronto Maple Leafs own Auston Matthews. No introduction needed there. And secondly, another guy that scored 50 goals right behind you, who's a longtime Maple Leaf, Gary Leeman. But before we get to that, let's reflect back and have a look at a moment in Leafs history that maybe people haven't seen before, but people should know about. Mikey, give us.
Coming right now.
We seem to be missing the sound on that one.
You guys aren't hearing the sound?
No, the sound didn't come out on that one. That's the whole thing about it.
It's a shame. It's a shame. Well, sorry, guys.
Well, you remember that night, Ricky? Do you remember the interview? You did.
Yeah,
well, like it took a lot of stress off you.
There was a little bit. It's not something that I thought about all the time, but I didn't even realize that a Maple Leaf had never scored 50 goals in a season until I got to about 45. And then I went like, wow, really? And then, of course, I got a little lucky. I got 4 against Chicago on Saturday night, which got me to 49 and passed Frank Mahovlich's 48. And then we played St. Louis next game at home and was able to score. Billy, if you watch that video, Billy gets it at the blue line, dekes one guy, cuts in on another guy, takes it wide. And, of course, Gary and I had great chemistry. I knew exactly where he was going with it. And so I just positioned myself there, got open, and of course it was right on the tape, and it was a one-timer that just went right by Mike Liu.
Well, that's great. I mean, we do want to spend some time getting into that as we go along from here. But I think, one of the things we should talk about, we missed before we bring our guests on, is the fact that the NHL moving forward, we see that they are going to try and complete the season with the playoff format that's been announced, if all things go according to plan. And I mean, what do you think of the way these things are set up with this playoff and so on going at us that we've had thrown so far set up?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, you had a real tight race in both conferences for the last two wild card spots. And when the season was paused, the Leafs had 12 games left. There were teams with 9, 10, 11, all different numbers. But there was probably 16 each conference for those last two spots. So I think it's a great idea to have 12 in each conference and have the play-in, and then from there you continue on like it's a regular playoffs and give out the Stanley Cup. I think it's a great idea.
I mean, I think too. I mean, you got to try something new, especially in the times that it's fair for 24 teams. I know the teams that are sitting outside don't think so, but a lot of them weren't going to qualify anyway. And I think it makes it very exciting because you've got an opportunity for a team to step up and have a long run because everybody's basically starting on the same level. Everybody's fresh. The players should all be healthy and everybody should be ready to go. So I think Gary Bettman and the PA have done a terrific job working together to make this happen, especially if you see what's going on with Major League Baseball and the bickering and fighting going on between both sides. It's just that, the fans are the losers in the end in all this. But I think the NHL should hold their head high if they can pull this off, and it seems to be moving along. But, well, again, it's anybody's guess what will happen as we see what's going on in this environment.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the NHL has done a fantastic job, and the players and the Player Association, along with them, have worked side by side to make sure that something like this can take place. And you know what? Who knows, Mike? Could this be a preview of playoffs down the road, maybe in the future, where you have 12 from each conference, you have a play-in, and then who knows? I mean, the more teams that you include in the playoffs, then their fans are filling the building right up until, the last game of the season. Whereas the other way, there's teams in 6, 7 in each conference that are out, and people aren't attending the games right till the last game. So it would make it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. And I think the way this thing is shaping up is the fact that, it's an open season for anybody. Fans are missing hockey. And as I said, it's a level playing field for everybody to start. So I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to, give a shot at this. And you know what? You got to try something new. It's the world we're living in now. People are trying different things. And I think this is, they've done a really admirable job so far trying to organize this. So we would be, without saying the obvious, we have to discuss how we think our guys may do as this thing does unfold. And, as we are, love us as we are as Maple Leaf fans, we always have to look at it from both angles. So let's think, first off, what do you think our chances are moving forward in the playoffs?
I think they're very good. I mean, I think if you look at both teams, you look at Columbus and you look at Toronto. Toronto obviously are a better offensive team, and I think they were probably in the top 5 or 6 in the league. And then you got Columbus, who are in the top 5 or 6 in the league in defense and goals against. So it should be, I think, a pretty good series. But I think the Leafs have a lot more depth, scoring-wise, and on defense, perhaps than Columbus does. So, and of course, Columbus doesn't have a whole lot of guys in goal that have played playoffs and have gone through that. So, whereas Freddie's been through it quite a few times, and we'll see what happens. But I give them probably the nod.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the Leafs, that is.
I also think that everybody, I'm not ignoring all you guys. We're trying to get a hold of Auston's trying to call in, and I'm going to give him some grief on this one because these young guys are supposed to operate these machines a lot better than we are as far as the technology goes. Like old guys like me and Rick, you know, we have to. He had his son directing him. I had my son directing me, and how to even open these screens up. And the young guy, he should be ashamed of himself not being able to click in on this. So we've just sent it.
Well, especially when they can get into those video games so easily, and you know, I see my son doing it all the time, and phones on there talking to. He's playing with a guy in Florida. He's playing with guys all over North America, and they're talking to each other through their headsets. So they should know the technology.
Yeah, I know. Geez, I mean, so just for sending him the link again to make sure he could click in and get on it, because this is all the trial issue here that Steve Menz behind the Sport Expo is trying. So far, he's had some successes. There are going to be some bumps on the road, but you know, we've got our podcast and we're using this stuff to carry us forward. And listen, this may be the way things are done moving into forward. So, I mean, just getting back to our guys, I mean, this is a discussion we can have endlessly, but let's just talk about our guys and what happens. We'll look at two scenarios. What happens if they lose in the first round? Because we always have to think that way as Maple Leafs, think the worst. What then happens with this hockey club?
Boy, I'll tell you, it's kind of interesting because probably with the fact that they've been off so long and everybody's kind of, like you said, at an even starting, you know, they're starting even. So if they lose, it might not be the end of the world in the first round. I mean, obviously it would be for the players and for management because it would be pretty upsetting if they were bounced in the play-in round. But you got to look at it from a lot of different angles. And, you know, it depends on how the team plays. If the team plays extremely well and they get beat because of a hot goaltender or bounces just didn't go their way, that's one thing. But I think at the end of it, when it's all said and done, if they were to lose, you know, it depends on how they lose, how they play. And, you know, if they don't like it, they're going to lose some unrestricted free agents, I believe, anyway, especially on defense. So perhaps if they don't win that play-in round, maybe a couple of forwards are moved out for a top defenseman, or maybe they sign a couple of UFA defensemen, and, you know, because they got to shore up their defense. There's no question about that.
Well, I think on the other hand, too, I mean, you touched on that was going to be my next point was, I mean, does it really matter how they lose? I mean, a loss is a loss, but if you lose in Game 5 in overtime to a pretty good hockey club in Columbus, it's pretty much evenly matched against Toronto. Is that enough to warrant a change? Or is that enough to say, give the players a little bit of grace of what they've gone through and give them another shot at that?
Well, again, it's personally, myself, I would say, you know, stick with what we have. We got to fill in where we lose UFAs, because we're going to, because we don't have the cap room to keep them all. And so you know that's going to happen. So you got to fill those gaps in maybe and say, okay, let's see what happens in the first half of, or the first quarter of next season. And if things aren't going the way we'd like them to go, then perhaps we start looking at moving a couple of guys or whatever. But I don't think panic has to set in if they don't win this play-in round. I mean, with all that's gone on since the middle of March, I mean, give the players a little bit of a break in the management, because this is something different that we've never seen before, Mike. And I think you have to kind of be cautious doing something just because you lost.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that aspect of it too, because you know, we like to think we're pretty smart guys, and we've got all the answers, of course, as Leaf fans. But I would suggest that Kyle Dubas.
Not around my house.
Well, yeah, around my house, my opinion comes in second sometimes when I'm talking to Ryan. But I think some of the time, you know, Kyle Dubas and his management team seem to be a little bit up in this, and I'm sure they've thought a lot of these theories through and about these outcomes through, and they probably have a plan. And so far, They've built some good depth in this organization. I think as good as you'll see around the National Hockey League. And you just saw that any injury they had this year was easily replaced with people from Marley's that were brought down the street. So I think that was a really good sign on that front.
Sort of jump in. Your guest has
no question. I think Kyle and Shanny and the whole team are on top of it, and they've got a lot of different balls in the air, probably figuring out what do we do if we do this, what do we do if this happens. I mean, you have to plan for all these different scenarios.
Mike, Rick, just to let
I'm
you know,
sure that they've gone over
your guest
these.
is here. I'm going to
Probably
put him up on
they've
stage.
got 5 different
stage and we'll
scenarios.
get her going.
So
yeah,
we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Listen, winning solves all problems, as we all know. Well, as I understand, we're being joined right now by our guest from the far part of the country. And I believe if he's about to join in. Auston, are you there with us yet? Oh, hang on. Auston, you made it.
Yeah, I'm here. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Listen, I was giving you a hard time before. I said, you young guys, you're supposed to be operating this technology a lot better than old guys like me and Rick.
Yeah, I know. I got I need some help with this stuff too, man.
So how's things go? How's the weather down here today, by the way?
It's a little warm. I'm not sure it's too appealing to really anybody, but it's getting into those months of the summertime where it's 105 every day, all day. So not much to do outside, for the majority of the day, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things of course, one of the things we want to talk about is, here, is this probably been the longest time you've been off skates since you've been a kid, like playing any kind of competitive hockey?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think from like my first year to like my third, fourth year, like the off seasons, I've taken more and more time off of skating, but obviously this is a bit of a different situation. So definitely the most time off I think I've had just not skating and just kind of unwinding.
So how's the training going?
It's good. It's good. I mean, it's been a bit different than your, I guess, average off season, but been making the most of it and doing everything I can to stay in shape and just be ready.
Now you've got a built-in road hockey goalie living with you. So
yeah.
Is there any matches going on in the driveway?
No, I lucked out. Having him here, just somebody to shoot on and just kind of I guess go through this with. Whether it was shooting pucks, shooting hoops, just nice to kind of have somebody with you, right? Just to kind of pass the time.
So here's one of the questions. I mean, get back to the training. Just got a lot of young viewers out there watching today. Take us through one of your workouts, like what you would do throughout the day as a training session.
I mean, I've kind of done some different stuff, here. I think I'm starting to kind of get away from like heavy weightlifting, I think, and just trying to kind of get my body just kind of feeling good and just kind of moving as well as I can. Because I mean, I'm pretty big and pretty strong, but I want to kind of be able to move like some of these smaller guys are able to move. So just kind of been trying some different stuff, and hopefully it kind of works out.
Yeah. So have you been able to get on the ice at all in your quarantine period or down isolated?
Yeah. Period? Yeah, no, I have been to get on the ice. I'm lucky. So I've been kind of trying to keep everything, shake the rust off and kind of stay in shape and just kind of, get your timing and everything back. But obviously, it's nothing like competitive NHL practice, right? So just trying to stay in that kind of motion and stuff. So when I am back, I can adjust quickly.
So it brings the next thing now. Psychologically, you're sitting at home and you're training, but nothing is like being at the rink or in your own real gym at the rink. Did you have to motivate yourself a little more to push yourself to stay training as hard as you do?
Yeah, a little bit. I think, I mean, I don't think there's really any extra motivation. Obviously, we're hoping that we can come back and play, and there's obviously a Stanley Cup up for grabs. So, I think that's as much motivation as you need right there.
So I think I've got Ricky. Rick, you're allowed to join this conversation, by the way. You're allowed to say something if you're like. Rick, you there? I think we lost Squid for the second there, Auston. I don't know. Maybe he is technically challenged. Okay. So
yeah, I don't see him anywhere here.
It's probably not a surprise that Well, actually, so I was going to say to you, now is Freddie's landlord, what are the, who designate the chores around the house? You?
No, I think it's a joint kind of production. I think everybody just kind of pitches in and does their part. But I mean, he's one of my closest friends on the team, and obviously he's like family to me. So I didn't hesitate to kind of invite him down here and stay with me. And I mean, he was nice enough to get me this really nice expensive coffee machine to kind of say thank you for letting him stay here. So it was very nice of him. He didn't need to do that.
Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I think that. So here's a couple of things here. I mean, Rick, if he can join us in here, we're going to get to him at some point. When you played in the North American World Cup for the North American team in World Cup as a rookie, did that? How much impact did that have on you, or take some of that anxiety you might have had as a rookie with high expectations coming into the Toronto camp?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of one of those things. I didn't really know what to expect, right? Like I'd never, I'd play at some high levels. I played in the World Championships against NHL guys. In the Swiss League, you're playing against some ex NHL veterans. So I didn't really know what to expect kind of going into it. Obviously, a lot of talented guys on the team. So I knew for myself, I was, starting off kind of as that 13th forward. So I kind of needed to earn my role and earn my position on the team. And I was lucky enough to have guys around me that I've known in the past or played with in the past to kind of help me adjust. But I think that was nice to kind of have that experience prior to my first NHL camp, just to I think psychologically just knowing that I can play and that I belong out here with some of the best players in the league, and obviously competing at a pretty high level in that tournament.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see it. And I mean, I think the other thing too is a lot of you guys were all roughly the same age, all within a couple of years of each other. So I think that also that bonding amongst all of you must have gone a long way too, especially when you're away from the rink, and because you're all basically in the same boat.
No, it absolutely did. And I think the biggest moments that we had, I think of, you want to call bonding, was, definitely came outside of the rink, and just dinners and stuff like that, and having a couple beers together and just kind of talking and just kind of bonding. So I think that stuff's super important. And like you said, we're all around the same age, all kind of going through I guess similar things, I guess, as far as our careers, and how they're just kind of starting. So it was definitely an amazing experience.
Which leads me to the next part that we're going to ask is Patrick Marleau. Now, there's a veteran who's been around, Hall of Famer to be for sure. And there's a guy that became a big brother to you and a number of the younger guys. I mean, we knew it seems like he was such a great guy. What was it about him that made this attraction and this bond with you and the other guys?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, he's just such a selfless person. Anything, he's just the guy that's always going to be there for you, no matter what the situation is or the scenario. And I think that's kind of something that, a lot of us kind of learn from him, and just, how he engages with each individual, with each teammate, staff member. I mean, he's the ultimate professional. So, no, those 2 years that I had with him were special ones. And even though we're not playing together anymore, I mean, he's a guy that he's a friend for life. So I'm really fortunate that I got the opportunity to play with him, and then obviously create that bond.
Yeah, and I mean, you could see that almost filter throughout that club, because as I suspect, just the way you guys all liked each other.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the way you can tell when guys play together whether they actually like each other or not, and that's not always the case in professional sports.
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone, and I mean, I've been lucky in my 4 seasons in Toronto. I mean, we've had great teams, great guys. Sometimes you can have a bad egg, and that can kind of put a bit of a damper on the team. But I mean, in my 4 years, it's just been all great guys. Whether they're still in Toronto or not, they're guys that you're gonna have relationships with and friendships with for life. So I feel really fortunate for that, and obviously Patty's one of those guys.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, okay, so you were approaching. We want to appease the hockey gods and not throw any jinxes at it, but you were approaching that magical number with a 5 in front of it. And now, was there a point in time when you actually thought that was possible to reach that? I mean, obviously when you got to 47, but before that. And I only say that because now, Rick, if he'll join us here at some point, when Rick was he was 22, by the way, when he scored scored 50 for the first time as a Maple Leaf. He said when he got to be at 45 goals, he realized never before had a Toronto player scored 50.
Yeah.
He didn't even know at that point. So what was your thoughts on all of that coming in?
I mean, to be honest, I just try to kind of keep my mind off it for the most part. But I think in the back of my head, I mean, I know what I'm capable of, and the expectations and the goals that I set for myself I think are higher than anybody else's are going to be. So, I mean, I think it's always in the back of your head, especially when you're kind of creeping up towards that number. And yeah, it's unfortunate I wasn't able to obviously complete that goal, and obviously with some games left. But I mean, I think everything happens for a reason, and I'm sure I'm hopeful to get another crack at it.
Well, I think you will. I'm a bit of a bet man the odd time, so I'm betting that you'll get another shot to do that. I'm sure, Auston.
Thank you.
Now, I think that one of the things that I'd ask you is when I followed the Leafs for every game last year and documented, I used to always check the warm-ups for you guys. And one of the things, well, let me set you up like this before I say that. Do you have any pregame rituals or any sort of pre-practice rituals that you do that, because every hockey player's got something they do that just every day they do this. We're all creatures of habits when it comes to the game.
Yeah, I do a lot of kind of like funky stuff, but I think it's just, I guess, your routine that you're going through and it just feels right. So for myself, I mean, I like to get to the rink pretty early. I'm usually one of the first guys there, and just I don't like to really be rushed. So whether it's a practice or a game, and I like to have a little bit of a snack, and then just kind of get into my whole routine, tape my stick, just kind of get everything aligned, get my my end game drinks kind of going, like a BioSteel or something like that, and get some treatment, stretch, kind of do all these stretches in my warm up all in the same order every time, and then I get dressed. I put on the left, like my left shin pad first, my left sock, left skate, weird stuff. And then for some reason, when I get to like my elbow, I always put my right elbow pad on first, and then I don't know, just like weird stuff, right? That I don't know. I guess when you think about it, it sounds crazy, but it's just kind of one of those psychological things. And then I say a prayer before I head out to warm ups, and then it's kind of just game mode from there on.
Well, one of the things I noticed, and it did stand out after a while following the guys, after going 89 games. I mean, I did notice after a while in the warm-ups, you and Mitch were always last guys to leave the ice. And it caught me a few games to catch it, but I would notice that every game then I started looking for it, that you would put a puck in the red dot of the face-off circle on the shooting end, and you'd be on one knee, you'd take a few shots, but then you guys were always last guys to leave the ice, and you'd flip a few pucks around and make a few dazzling passes, and then toss a few pucks to the kids. I actually made some good graces with kids I'd see the kids with the signs, and I tell them they were trying to get a puck. I'd tell them where you would go because you guys threw them almost invariably at the same spot all the time. But what started that end of the pregame skate ritual?
I mean, it's good that you're reminding me of this stuff because a lot of it I've already forgotten. So once we get back to playing, I'm going to need you to maybe send me this interview so I can go back and make sure I'm doing all my crazy stuff. But yeah, I usually I come and meet Freddie kind of probably halfway through warm-ups, and then he goes in the net, and I put a puck there that I end up shooting probably a couple minutes later. But I don't really know what started it. I've always kind of liked being the last guy off in warm-ups, and I think my first year McCulloch was the guy that liked to be the last one off. So obviously I respected him, veteran guy, and let him do his thing. And then obviously once he was no longer with us, I was always kind of last guy. So and then I think just it's cool. I think our warm-ups we tend to fill up the stands quite well, and there's a lot of kids that come down with signs and stuff like that. So I mean, I don't really see a problem kind of taking 5 seconds out of your warm-up to toss a kid a puck and kind of make his day. So I think that's what the game's all about, and I don't think it's something that myself or Mitchie are going to stop doing.
Well, I'm sure you saw it, but I saw a couple smiles on the faces when they'd run after me and follow me after and then show me the pucks, and it's worth it. Believe me, you're putting big smiles in some pretty big kids' faces. So,
yeah, of course.
I think I know you're probably on the run and you're pretty busy. So one more question here, just for some of the people out there. Now, the dressing room, we touched on that before. Who's the well, I was going to ask you PlayStation. Maybe this would be a double question. Who's the best Xbox PlayStation player in the team? And who's the biggest clown?
I'd say the best Xbox or PlayStation player would probably have to be Mitch Marner or Zach Hyman. Hyman started his own gaming company, so he takes it pretty seriously. He's pretty dialed in. And then the biggest clown, I don't want to say clown, but
no,
for sure
the
jokester for sure is Justin Hall. He's got quite the sense of humor. Just a nice guy to be around. Always makes a laugh. So I'd have to go with him. Awesome guy.
Well, that's awesome. Well, listen, Auston, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I can't believe Squid missed it all, but I don't know what happened to him. He probably pushed exit by mistake. But,
yeah, who knows? I was looking forward to talking to Rick.
Well, what we're going to do, though, is when we do that day event eventually happens, we're not going to, again, remember the hockey guys we're watching?
Yeah.
We're going to get you back on the podcast if we can, and we'll have a little chat with them about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, my man. Listen, thanks very much, Auston, and the best of luck to you, and looking for you to get back here sooner than later.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Take care.
Okay, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Okay, now I don't know what happened to Rick, but there you have Auston. He seems good shape. He's pretty healthy and raring to go and very excitable. And we lost Rick for the moment, so I guess I've just got to carry on, until our next guest joins us, which is Gary Leeman. And you know what? It's kind of funny to listen to how they talk. I would have picked Justin Hole as the guy who would be the jokester of the team. I would have picked probably somebody like Tyson Barrie, and I maybe would have thought it would have been maybe even Mitch Marner would be the guy he would talk about. But so that was a very interesting chat. And I'm looking for Gary to join us here in a couple of minutes. So I think if we've got him and hook him in. But again, guys, we are dealing with new technology. Things seem to be working okay. And I think that we're just waiting for Gary for a second here. Mikey, have you got Gary? And that actually, no luck. So there's this awkward moment, folks. Silence. This is not what's supposed to happen when you're doing live, I guess what this is called, live podcast. I lost my winger, and I got Gary coming on in a second here, and no Squid. So that's not working out very well for us so far, because he's supposed to ask him a couple of questions. So I think Gary's coming in about it. He's coming on in a second here. So just a second, guys, and just bear with us. So I think, I that what you've got to see is that I mentioned the book before. It's been a lot of fun. Actually, if you guys want to laugh, for people that don't know me, I'm auditioning to do the audio version of the book. So wait and see how that shapes up, boys. I'm telling you, I got the script sent to me that I got to send back to them in the next few days, and that's going to probably be good for a good laugh. So I don't know where Gary is, but he's supposed to be on the screen here any moment. And Mikey, anything happening? And we've got that awkward silence again. And now we've got
little technical difficulties. We're gonna try to get Gary on. We're gonna try again. He tried to join us, and we're still on the search for Rick.
And what happened to where is Squid? What happened to him?
We're gonna find Squid. We're looking for Squid. We're gonna find him.
Well, while you got that, actually, you know what we can do? You can help me out here because we're gonna do it. We got to show that clip we're gonna show of Auston, the couple of the goals.
Okay. All right. Give me a second here. Let me line that up.
Can we get any sound on this?
Let's hope best practices, best hopes. Hockey gods.
Well, we've got our fingers crossed here in this one, guys. So hopefully we got. We were supposed to. This was going to be the intro. And we're going to get it again. And okay, all set. And there's Gary Leeman coming into the bottom corner. Gary, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thanks. How you guys doing?
I'm great. I'm going to get off and let you guys talk.
Now find Squid, will you?
We're going to work on that. Thanks, Gary. Great.
No problem.
So Gary, yeah, okay. Again, old guy, obviously can't be the smartest guy in 2 feet as far as technology goes. He's clicked himself off the screen. So how you doing today?
I'm good. I haven't even seen myself on the screen yet. That's how bad it is. So I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to maneuver my way if I can. There we go. There we go.
I can see it, but your lips aren't moving. It's just a face. So again, this is crazy
Can you
technology in here.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Okay, good.
We
The
can
lips are moving. Look at my lips are now moving. So, and
Well,
my guess is Squid is probably practicing his putting or something.
Oh
oh,
no,
there
I'm
he
Oh,
is.
there
here.
he is.
Oh, thanks for
Right
joining.
on. There we go. There we
What's up,
go.
Gary?
How you doing, buddy? I'm just listening to you guys just blab away about the old days.
Yeah,
Well,
the
actually, you're going to get your
old.
chance.
Oh yeah, you're gonna get a
get.
chance to talk about us in our old days.
Well, remember, it is a family show today. There are kids listening, so we'll do that on one of our other podcasts. Okay, so they're the real stories. But now,
Yeah,
Gary, let's get some housekeeping out of the way first. You're you're a Toronto boy. Were you a fan growing up? I assume.
absolutely. Yes. Born and raised a Leaf fan. Drank the Kool-Aid real young.
Yeah.
Don't say you
They
used to watch me with your father either when you were young.
no, I hadn't even heard of you yet, buddy. Sorry.
Well,
My guys
when I was
growing up playing road hockey were, Boria and Daryl and Lanny and Palmy and that era. I'll throw Jack Valaquette in there because he's a good buddy. So yeah, those were the guys. They had a real good team. They developed that team into the '78 contending team, and then things went sideways after that. So, but I kept my allegiance. I kept my allegiance and always wanted to be drafted by them, and got my wish.
and you got your wish. So I mean, now what were your expectations going to your first camp? After that, like, were you really excited, I mean, obviously you were, but I mean, was it beyond your belief that this could actually really happen?
But you were
Oh,
also
it
drafted
was
as a defenseman, though, Gary, right?
Yeah, it's a defenseman.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that I went in with great expectations because I was partnered with Boria Salming the whole camp, and I had a great camp. I was young and in shape, and it was still a time when guys were using camp to get into shape, so that was kind of an advantage for me also. And then at the end of camp, Jerry McNamara, GM, pulled me in and said to me, he said, "I just want you to know, I thought you were our best player in camp." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, I just made the team." And then he says, "But we're going to send you back to junior for another year." So, so it was kind of confusing for a little bit, but I understood why. I went back to junior, played a whole season on defense, and had a great year, and then was ready to come back. But
So, who looked after you? Who took you under their wing when you finally made the hockey club? And how did Squid treat you as a rookie?
well, I can always say Squid always treated me really well to this day. He's a good buddy, and he was obviously one of the leaders on the team at that time. And what a tough time to be a leader, with knowing that you're going to have to butt heads with Harold, and that had sort of been the trend. I think coming into it for Rick, where before him was Daryl, and I think I think that with Boria there, I think we all sort of looked to him, and I would imagine even Squid, would have looked to Boria for leadership. And I think Boria, being there as long as he had been, realized that if he wanted the captaincy, it would have, he might have been able to have it, but I don't think he ever wanted to butt heads with Harold, and so it was sort of thrown, in my mind, it was thrown a little bit at Rick, and it was a tough task, I'll tell you.
Pick up on that, Rick.
Well, Yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, Boria was a big help. Ronnie Ellis was also a big help early when I first got there because I sat. So it was kind of like where you have the Devil and the Saint on the other one, and you try to figure out which one to follow. And but Boria was a big help. I remember him standing up a few times and saying, "Hey, listen, like, the guy's speaking up and he's right." So I have to give him a lot of credit for helping me out early because it wasn't easy, and especially in my case, he just said, "You're the captain." Like he didn't even ask me, and I knew I wasn't ready at 22 years old, and I figured, but if I said no, he was going to trade me. And at that point in my career, I'd already been traded once, and I didn't want it to happen. I wanted in Toronto.
And you guys, so I mean, let's just pick up and take one step further. I mean, Gary, I know in your 9 years at the Maple Leafs, you played for 5 coaches. I think Squid, you played for 6. And
Five, yeah,
just
5.
talk about that. That's for both you guys. I mean, talk about that turbulent time. Gary, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, I counted 9. I think 6 officially. So Mike Nickluck was my first coach.
Yeah.
And then Dan Maloney, then John Brophy, and then
Doug Carpenter.
George Armstrong.
George in there too, sorry.
George was in there, but even before George, like Gary LaRiviere took over from Brof, and then Floyd Smith jumped in for a cup of coffee and as the GM coach, and then he decided to relieve himself of that, and then the story was that Harold basically held George's job over his head if he didn't take the job. So we ended up with George, who is a great personality, just a great guy to be around, and just amazing stories. And just for us at that time, he might have been a breath of fresh air, but there was certainly no structure. If there was, it was coming from Gary LaRiviere, and he had been obviously in the game a long time, but those were really turbulent times. A lot of dysfunction within the organization, and a lot of change. And anytime there's change at the top, it filters its way down, and it happened way too often for anybody really in the organization to get any traction, to get any momentum. It was really unfortunate. You work your whole life to become a professional hockey player, and then you make it to one of the most storied franchises ever, and then this happens. It's really unfortunate. It's funny to a lot of people, but I look back and I go, what a shame. We had so many good players there. We had a lot of good people there, and we just were never given the opportunity to grow and to be consistent. And and hopefully that's something they're mindful of right now with the present hockey team, because the same idea, they've got so much talent there. They've got, a lot of pieces in place, which I felt we had, maybe other than experienced goaltending at the time. But, if they're learning from the past, that's certainly a good era to learn from.
Well, one of the things that I was on Bay Street for 40 years, and one of the things that I've preached this many, many times about the Toronto Maple Leafs from your era and before that to the modern era, just like on a Bay Street company, you never invest in a company without going through management. And as management is usually how the company is. So it starts at the top and it filters to the bottom. And that goes for anything that we do in life. And I think if you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the example I use, and I've used this many times, is that Deb and I had dinner with Brendan Shannon a few years ago. And one of the things we talked about that I'd heard a rumor when they changed the crest to make it a little bit bigger. And they did a test run within the buildings to look at it to see that, make sure you can see from all the different angles of the building. Now, some people may think that that's petty or ridiculous, but that's paying attention to detail and looking after small things like that. I think players hear that, see that, and experience it, and that gives them comfort to know that these guys are doing a thorough job. And you can see the results around the ice and the players, and you can see the way the players act, that it's run as a professional organization. And it starts right there. So I think you guys were behind the 8 ball before you even dropped the puck at center ice.
Well, it's certainly nice to know that somebody's got your back, within the organization. And it shouldn't just be one person, where it might have been in the past. And the reason I say that is because when ownership was hiring both the GM and the coach, they weren't really allowed to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So they were never given that opportunity. And what you just talked about the smaller things, like making the crest bigger or whatever, that would play into your psyche, knowing that, everybody's on the same page here. Everybody wants to do something, positive, whatever their role was, to create a winning atmosphere, which it does take. I mean, think about it. You're playing against 30 other teams now, or 31, whatever it is, where they're all trying to get the edge also. So, everybody's hiring these, sports psychologists. I mean, we could have used a team of those back then, trust me, but that would have had to start at the top, though.
Would have had to start at the top.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Rick told me a story the other day that Harold, when he was having problems with his feet, he used to have to get his feet rubbed by the trainer every morning, and players would have to wait to get taped before he was finished before they go out on the ice. But those are all the things that everybody really understands, that we're hearing all these things come out now about the Maple Leafs and how the organization was mismanaged. So, I mean, what you guys really accomplished was actually something with what you guys were going through. So let's get to a couple of things here. Your career, you were started off in the defense. You were a good defenseman and you moved to the forward. For those out there who don't understand it, talk to us about the Hound line and how that all developed and where it came from. And some of the younger viewers may not know this.
Well, they had drafted myself in 1982, and they drafted Russ Courtnall was it a year later or 2 years later?
Yeah, I think a year later.
A year later, and then Wendell is 3 years younger, so he came a couple years after that. We all had gone to the same school out west in Saskatchewan, Athol Murray College of Notre Dame, which was a real hockey factory at the time. Great coaching, a great situation for players that want to develop their skills. You get 2 hours ice time every day on Olympic-sized rink. World-class coaching through Barry McKenzie, Terry O'Malley, who had gone through the Canadian Olympic program under Father Bauer, and so the players that were coming out of that were on the right course. They were developing them properly, and so the Leafs had drafted 3 guys in a 3-year span of each other, and decided, well, let's just throw them together as a line and see what happens. One just happened to be a centerman, one was a left winger, one was a right winger. Both us wingers, Wendell and I, were part-time defense, part-time forward, and so there were so many bodies that had gone through the dressing room in just that short time, that, hey, let's put this young line together and see what happens. And it was kind of a neat thing. I think we all got inspired about it, because we knew the history of it, and we felt like there was maybe no light at the end of the tunnel. And hey, let's throw these young guys together and see what we got, give them some ice time. And of course, we all know the history of the 3 of us, where Wendell sort of came along as he was a first pick overall, so there was a lot of expectation. But who ever expected him to come in and sort of dominate physically like that. And so right off the bat, that gave us some space and some, we had, I think Russ and I had broader shoulders because of that.
Well, a little boxing. You grew 6
Yeah.
inches.
Yeah, well, not quite 6. I mean, we come out of the Western Hockey League, and that was a must. So that's where I learned that I had to fight if I was going to survive at the next level. So that was indoctrinated the couple years before. Not something that I, thought was a big part of the game, and until you get there and you realize it is, at that time it was a huge part of the game. So if you want to survive, you gotta show that you're either going to stick up for yourself and or your teammates. And so the line didn't stay together a long time. We were energetic and good offensively. We had nobody teaching us how to play defense, and that that inevitably hurt the whole team. As a whole, like defensively as a whole, we didn't know what we were doing.
Well, that's evident. You can see that. And I mean, it's been talked about before that the coaching was lacking and the leadership was lacking from above, and it all filters through. So regardless, and in spite of all that, guys like yourself and Squid were able to shine above that. Wendell, Russ to a degree, all these guys. And, you went from 21 goals to 30 to 32, and then you hit the magical 50. So tell us about that season and just your thought process as you got closer to the number.
Well, that was, I'm not a stats guy. I'm not a numbers guy, and I don't really pay much attention to, I don't think I want to win, and I sort of I felt like I was kind of sacrificing a lot of my career staying in Toronto, seeing the dysfunction and seeing how things, may never change, but hoping that you could be one of the players to help turn this thing around. And the reason I wanted to stay really was because I had left Toronto when I was 15 years old to go to Notre Dame. So I spent two years there, and then I spent my 2 junior years in Regina. So I'm 4 years away from home at 15 years old. And, you lose touch with your friends, you lose touch with your family, life is totally different. And for me, it was like, it'd be an accomplishment if I could make it back to Toronto as a Toronto Maple Leaf. And I wasn't really aware of how poor the team was at that time until I got there. And then, I wanted to be, like I said, I wanted to be one of the guys to help turn that ship around.
Yeah, and so I mean, of course, now, so I mean, you're not a stats guy. So I mean, Rick had broke the record a few years before while you were there.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, when you hit the 50, though, I mean, it must give you a little bit of gratification. You must admit that felt pretty good to hit that number, though, when it did.
Yeah, no question. I'll tell you a story about.
You're only the second Leaf ever to do it.
Yeah, and maybe I was just telling myself, don't think about it, don't worry about it, and because things were going great. I mean, I look back and I think I should have had 65 goals that year. Like the chances and the goalposts and all the things, like, and I thought, wow, this is going to happen. But I'll tell you a kind of a neat little story about when I was at 42 goals. And I got into a fight with Adam Creighton, and I hit the bridge of his helmet with my knuckle. And I go to the penalty box, and I'm looking at my knuckle, and I'm squeezing my hand together, and I'm watching the tendon slide between my 2 fingers, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I think I'm done for the year. And so I stopped moving it, and we taped it up, and I continued to play. I couldn't really hold the stick. And I hadn't, so as you are playing, obviously, they see in the game and they're wondering why you're not scoring now. So Floyd Smith, our GM, pulled me aside. We're on our way to New York after a practice, and he pulled me aside. I hadn't scored in 6 games, and he said, hey, what's going on? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you haven't scored in 6 games. I said, well, I can't hold my stick. And he goes, how come? So he like the story didn't get to him, right? The information didn't get to him. And he said to me, he said, you've got a chance to do something not many guys get a chance to do. And I actually said to him, what do you mean? He says, you got a chance to score 50 goals. And I thought, damn, why did you put that in my head? You know, like I'm not going out there trying to score goals every shot. I'm trying to do something, you know, positive. It depends on, you know, what's happening that shift, right?
Yeah.
So the good news was we went to New York. I got 2 the next night, and but I had gone to Eddie O and Ozzy, Mark Osborne, my line mates, and I said, hey, listen, guys, all passes come here now. And they kind of looked at me funny. What are you talking about? And I said, well, so Smitty just told me, you know, I got to start scoring again. So it was great that we had the relationship that we had, and we never changed a thing. They were very, very unselfish players, great guys to play with. You could discuss anything, and you know, we would kind of do things on the fly. And you know, one of the things that people need to realize is, you know, if you're going to score 50 goals, if you're going to score 70 goals, it doesn't matter. You need line mates that play the kind of hockey that affords the player that's in maybe the best position or situation to have the puck. So myself, I give a lot of credit to my line mates, Ed Olchuk and Mark Osborne, 2 very underrated offensive guys that can play actually on both ends of the ice. And if you look at the players that helped Rick Vive, and certainly Auston was well on his way. Auston has Mitch Marner, a great playmaker on his line, who looks for him all the time. Ricky had both Dando and Bill Derlago, you know, two guys that are very, very unselfish players. So you know, you have to give credit to the line mates. And John Anderson, I mean, John Anderson was a hell of a hockey player that Ricky played with, and these guys deserve as much credit.
Well, you know, it's funny you mention that because Frank Mahovlich, when he set the bar at 48, his centerman, Red Kelly, got hurt. And one of the things is, so I mean, that kind of slowed him somewhat, playing with a great player like Kelly, which everybody seems to forget. But one of the other things was that he seemed to get a lot more attention as he got closer to 50 and was double checking. There's questions for both you and Squid, and I guess he's still trying to find Happy Days or something on me. You know, I don't know. But I was going to ask you both, did you feel like you're getting extra attention as you got closer to the number?
I don't know whether I felt that. I didn't really think about it. I think is the best way to put it. And I was always a player that looked for open ice. Mm-hmm. I was always somebody that went to the place that the puck was. And I think that's the place to go. I still think it's the place to go. It's you know, everybody's thinking of where it's going to go next. Well, you know, there's open space where it just was. And so for me, that was something I concentrated on. Yeah, I mean, you know, we were the top line that year. We were the top line for about 3 years, and we saw the best checking lines or the number 1 line. So, you know, if we were playing against, say, Detroit, we're usually playing against Yzerman, who had Gallant and Proby, and you know, they'd mix things up, and you know, same in St. Louis. St. Louis was they were always a really strong checking team. So I saw the checkers all the time when I played against St. Louis, and they were deep with their checkers. They had, it seemed like every line could check in St. Louis. So you were always playing. We were, you know, at the peak of my career, those 3 years, I was playing against either the checkers or the top line.
Well, it's funny you mentioned St. Louis because that was one of my questions coming up. We were going to get to the trade, and it's funny. I was teasing Squid a little bit. I said we're going to give Gary a little bit of a a tease on this to be the fact that you're probably more well known for being a part of the trade, a key part of that trade for Gilmore, than scoring 50 goals as a Maple Leaf for the second time. So maybe just we're running out of. It looks like I'm getting nods from from Mikey, the producer, that we're getting close on time. So maybe we'll have to save up some from that day. But maybe quickly just walk us through that trade and how it happened that day and what you went through that whole process.
What, does Mikey have a date or something?
I don't know what he's rushing for. I mean,
yeah. Settle down, Mikey. This is this is Leaf lore, isn't it?
It's what I would have thought.
So a lot of people don't know about the back end of all of what was happening. So
he gave us 10 minutes, by the way, more.
Oh, right. How long?
He gave us 10 minutes. He does not pick his date up until 6:30.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's a bit of a story. So, but if you're a Leaf fan, like you say you are, Mike, you got to know these. You got to know the important stories. You know, and what happens in the background, and a lot of that stuff. Obviously, they're not going to tell fans, and us as players and ex-players, we hear the stories through our agents and managers and stuff like that. Sometimes not right away, but sometimes afterwards. Anyhow, so when Cliff Fletcher showed up in Toronto, one of the things he brought to Toronto was something new. It was a breath of fresh air, and it was a guy that we as players, there's the hockey world that the players on other teams, and they tell you what people are like, what guys are like, what managers are like, and we knew we were getting like a Santa Claus type guy, a guy that was going to come in and treat players good. And so one of the things Cliff did is he came to me at the beginning of the season. He said, Gary, I know you had a tough season last year. You separated your shoulder, blah, blah, blah. He says, do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I was like, wow, we've never had anybody that would ask us that question and be able to trust. Because, if you said that you wanted to go to Los Angeles, let's say, they'd send you to Quebec City or Edmonton, somewhere in the opposite direction. Yeah. And so that was kind of a new thing. That was a very new thing for Toronto. So I said to Cliff, and the reason I said this, I knew Cliff had tried to trade for me a couple years before, in 1988. He tried to bring me to Calgary. But the word was that we were going after Grant Fuhr. And I didn't want to go to Edmonton because if they're getting rid of Furzy and Gretz had left, they're in a rebuild. I don't want to go to another rebuild. So I said to Cliff, as of right now, I'd like to stay. So he said, okay, no problem. Then they pulled the deal where we traded Vinny Danfus, Luke Richardson, Scotty Thornton, Peter Ing, and future considerations in $100,000 cash for Furzy, Glenn Anderson, and Craig Berube. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the trade I think people should be looking at and saying, what did we just do here? If you go back and you look at how long all those players played from that day on, the Toronto Maple Leafs gave up 50 years of service. So the combined amount of years that Scotty Thornton, Luke Richardson, and Vincent Danfus played was 58 years. And that is a huge hole that is left in your organization. They're all, first round picks. And so what happened was they make that trade, and then when those guys came in, things were no better. Mm-hmm. They were pretty much on the downside of their careers. Andy lasted a couple of years in Toronto, 2 or 3 years, and same with Grant. And now for Grant, they got Andy, Dave Anderchuk, which was a good deal. But for me leaving, I then went to my agent after this Edmonton deal had happened, and it wasn't right away. It was probably a month or two later, and I told Rick Kern, I said, Rick, I want to leave now. And he said, really? I said, yeah. So he calls me back and he said, Gary, they don't want to trade you. And I said, who'd you talk to? He said, I talked to Bill Waters. Now, Ricky and Bill were agents together.
Mhm.
And I said, no, call Cliff. And he had horror in his voice because we used to joke about it all the time, like, get me out of here, you know?
Yeah.
But that's when he called Cliff and he called me right back and he said, Gary, there's something in the works already. And there was already talk of the 4 guys that came from Calgary. They had all been promised new contracts the year before.
Mhm.
And Cliff wasn't allowed to give it to them. And that's how Cliff came to Toronto, because ownership in Calgary said, you can't give these guys raises next year. We've lost money. And Cliff said, I'm a man of my word. And, if I can't give them raises, I want permission to talk to other teams. And that's how he came to Toronto. So he knew who was available. He was targeting those guys. And I heard afterwards that instead of me, it was going to be Daniel Marois. And this is all stuff I heard from my agent. So I knew it was coming. I actually pulled the trigger on it, but there was already something on the go. And I was okay with it, except, it would have been nice to be in Toronto when things started to go better. But, there's only one guy that won the cup after that trade. So you're talking to him.
Just gonna say, you got a cup ring. The other guys didn't get one, so that was pretty good. So,
Yeah.
well, I think that I got old Mikey here. I mean, I guess he must have reservations at 7 or something like that because he's pushing us here. But Gary, I know that there's lots more we could talk about. I know Squid had a pile of stuff to go through with you, but we'll have to save that maybe for another day when we do our podcast in the future. We'll get you back if we can. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. There's lots we could still cover with you, but it's been very enlightening. And listen, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Okay, man. Talk to you soon.
You got it.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
folks, I think that, after that, we've had 2 great guests today. Auston was very engaging and very open with the way things work. I mean, you learned a little bit about his training schedule. Gary, of course, has got a million stories. I lost my winger. I don't know what happened to him, but he disappeared for some reason. But, life goes on and we go and we make the best of it with this technology we have, and we've survived. So thanks for joining us. And guys, look for us. Our podcast will be coming up to you. We weren't going to, this is one of the reasons why we weren't doing our podcast, for things like this happening to people, for breaking down. This is why we like doing them live and in the studio. But we plan on going forward with Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Stay tuned to watch. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, with the shameless self-promotion, my book comes out October 6th on following the Leafs for all 89 games last year. Rick's book comes out in November. You can reach him at Rick5 on Instagram. You can reach me at the Ultimate Leafs Fan on Instagram. Send me your comments on what you thought of today's show, how we went about it, the type of things you'd like to learn from players. Somebody sent me an email today asking if we would do a story on the escrow. And I think that I've been doing a little bit of work on that. That's something we'd like to get some guests on and talk about it, to enlighten fans about how it actually does really work. So those are a couple of things. We've had somebody else talk to us about maybe minor league hockey and dealing with some of the kids that played in the Marleau chain as an example, or wherever they've gone on the intro. Rick's son is an example, and John Tavares played together with the Marleau minor hockey team for 3 years together, and Justin was there for 4 years. So those are the type of things we're looking at maybe down the road. Guys, thanks for joining in and tuning into the show. If you're around tomorrow and you come back to the Sport Expo, come and visit me at my site at the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Click on and say hi. I've got some vintage photographs set up for you that I've acquired from the 60s. All Maple Leafs. Some of these things are absolutely stunning, beautiful. You want to have a look at them. And come and talk to me tomorrow. We'll be around all day between 11 and 5 o'clock. Talk to you guys soon. Oh, and there's Rick coming back on. Of course, it's ending, and I've done all the heavy lifting, and now you show up. Is that how you scored 54 goals one year?
Well, you should see the stick I used to do it, too. It was horrible, but not, well.
Okay, tell it. What happened to you just now? Where'd you go?
I disappeared, and then I was looking for the link to hit camera and I couldn't find it. And
You zigged when you should have zagged.
well, anyway, I was listening to you and Gary though, and it was very, very interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting, the Gilmore trade. But one of the ones I want to get to here, I'll throw this one at you. Well, we've got Mikey. Do we still have a few minutes, or can you postpone your date for 10 minutes or so? What we would like to do is 6 coaches. Well, Gary counted 9 if you count all the interim guys. Some of the coaches. Now, you heard Auston talking about the training that they go through today and what they do. Maybe walk some of the people on our listeners through what you guys would do and how your training camps would operate and some of the stuff that would go on, like for somebody like a John Brophy.
Well, I mean, ours were quite a bit different. In fact, I mean, we would do some biking and other things, and then throughout the summer, not a whole lot of weightlifting. And then, but don't forget, our training camp was 2 weeks of 2-a-day practices before we even played an exhibition game. And it was grueling. So you didn't want to do a whole lot during the summer. We did probably August, we were on the ice 5 days a week. And then early September, then camp would start. And like I said, we do 2 hours in the morning, a scrimmage and a skate, and then a scrimmage and a skate in the afternoon. So
well, here's the thing for you. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What I was going to say to you was here's one of the things I want to talk about also, is because again we're being pushed here a little bit, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was with today's CBA, and this is one of the topics I told everybody, I think you heard me, we're going to go on and talk about at one point in the future. Is could you just give us the John Brophy story, how he react to these limited practices that they have, like 40 minutes, and so much time, and you can't do double practices and skating after losses, all that stuff. Maybe give us a couple little Brophy stories, Dan, or any coach along those lines. I'm sure there's a couple beauties.
One I remember was, well, he was an assistant actually, and Dan Maloney was the coach. We lost in Winnipeg 10-0, and we flew back the next day. We arrived in Toronto about 3 o'clock. We had to go right to the gardens, and then we had to watch the entire game, then put our equipment on and skate for an hour and a half. And the one with Broke, I was actually coaching against them in the ECHL, and we beat them in their building. And we went in, showered, we're getting ready, walking out of the arena. And he's got his players out there skating after the game because they lost. And that was kind of how it was with most of the coaches back then, Mike, is that,
yeah.
I mean, that was their biggest thing, was skate you till you can't stand up anymore. And now there's rules in effect that, basically you don't start 1 minute before 11 o'clock if that's what time practice is starting. And training camp, they have 3 hours maximum a day, and but it was a little bit different back then, and I don't regret any of it. I wouldn't say that I was really, really upset over any of it, because that's just the way the coaches were back then.
Yeah. So I think, it evolves with time. Look at the days back when Eddie Shore was coaching in the minors back in the 50s and the 60s, and the stuff that he used to do to coaches or to players and yelling at everybody, and the way he'd put players through their paces and so on. So, it all evolves with time. And, today's game, I guess you kind of look back and reflect and think, boy, sometimes you guys may think you have a little tough. Now these kids look at, they go to the rink, you have a morning skate, they work on their edges, they come out and there's a chef there cooking them a full dinner, and they go home and have a nap and come back to the rink. In your day,
it's funny because
nothing like that.
Back in the 80s and before, and even in the early 90s, we had recallable waivers, it was called. There was regular waivers, recallable waivers. So they could pretty much get anybody to the minors if they want. I remember Steve Thomas, Stumpy, got sent. He was in St. Catharines, and he got called up, and Bro said, "We brought you up here to score goals." He says, "It might be 80 kilometers from St. Catharines to here, but it's about 40,000 miles back." So, they had a way to get anybody down to the minors at any of the season because of the recallable waivers. Completely different time, and now they got a good players association that negotiate really well with Mr. Bettman and Daly and the NHL, and so far we've had some pretty good CBAs and things going in the last probably 10 years. There's been a couple of blips, but they work together pretty good now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be very fair, and there's some talk about obviously what will happen moving forward if the season gets delayed. The NHL's in the hole, obviously, and the talk is with the escrow whether it will stay 50-50 or the NHL will lean a little bit and give the players a little break on that. From what I hear, there's some good things happening on that front, possibly that there may be a little bit of give, but regardless, it looks to me like they're working hand in hand, which is showing good leadership is a recipe for success, and that's what you're seeing. So, well, Squid, we are at that moment in time again where we have to call it a day. We could talk forever.
I apologize for all the technical problems.
Well, I explained that's why we like doing them live in the studio, because then we can't make.
Yeah, we can't screw up.
Well, we make lots of mistakes, but not quite like. Well, this is the way, but I think it worked out well. Auston gave us a good, got some good stuff out of Gary, and both have promised to come back on and extend their stories some more. So, as I said, you can reach me at ultimateleafsfan.com. Send us some comments about today, anything you'd like us to talk about going forward. We'd love to hear from you. Ricky is Rick5 on Instagram. You can reach me on Instagram at the Ultimate Leafs Fan, or on Twitter at ULeafFan. Come and see us, I said, tomorrow at the show. Come to my booth at the exhibit, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. I'd love to talk to you guys. Anyway, listen, guys, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for having us, Steve, in the Sport Expo. Guys, talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot.